Hello, everybody. It's hard to see you guys. I'm used to seeing because that way I can call you out if you fall asleep or that sort of thing. We got me on. There we go. So today, I know we are streaming, and we may end up having a lot of folks listening on the stream. But today, I want to talk to you about how we can improve education. Now, one thing that we need to all understand, and Mike alluded to this, neuroscience is showing us that kids' brains are wired differently than our brains. They actually scan more, they have a shorter attention span, they are wired differently. So everything that you know about your education, you can't turn around and apply that to today's kids. You can't say, well, when I was a kid, we sat in the back of the room and they gave us a book and we studied it and we took a test and we liked it. You can't say that because that's not how they're wired now. So just understand that just because something worked one way previously, we have to be different and we have to think differently. And all the structures that grew up in education grew up in a time when we were trying to have a more industrial age model. Well, now we want to have creativity. So today, the goal is to really talk about what are some of the buzzwords that when you go back to your area and you talk to educators, what are they going to be talking about? What are they going to be asking for money for? What are they excited about? What are the things that are really worldwide changes that people around the world are talking about? So I am from Georgia, born and bred in Georgia. I'm a farm girl. My dad is one of the few living people in the Georgia Hall of Fame. His name is James Lee Adams from Camilla. And what he did really impacted me because he was a farmer who also worked with policy and also worked with helping technology improve farming. So I kind of feel the same way. I have a blog, I have a podcast, I have a reach all over the place, but I'm in the classroom. So the first question I want to address is, what if? What are the things that if I had my wish that every single school in our whole state would have? Now, we have to think, when we think Georgia, I was in Leadership Georgia, and they really emphasized that we have to think everybody. It's not enough that my child is at a good school or your child is at a good school. We have to think about all schools. So what do we wish that every single school would have? And there's a couple things. The first thing we have to understand about education is it's all about relationship. If you don't have a relationship with the children, you cannot teach them. That's what the research shows, that students will resist rules and procedures. They will resist discipline if the foundation of a good relationship is lacking. To educate, you have to relate, and that is first. Well, I have a friend, Nancy Blair. I get to interview people all over the world in my podcast I have called The 10-Minute Teacher, and I had her on the show a couple weeks ago. She's a principal over in Fayette County at Rising Star Middle School, and she actually had all the teachers in her school take 5 minutes and list every single name of every student that they could remember. They identified a pretty significant number of kids that nobody named in that 5 minutes. And they intentionally decided to make sure that every child in that school would have an adult who had a relationship with that child. What do you think happened with discipline problems? Do you think they went down or up? Y'all show me a thumbs down or a thumbs up. That's how I make sure my students are awake. You think discipline problems went up or you think discipline problems went down? Yes, they went down significantly because every child had somebody they mattered to. You know, we have a lot of politicians in here, and who do you know? You know the crazy people and you know the big supporters, right? That's who you know. That's who you think about. The people who harass you and the people who give you money and support you. This is the same for teachers. We know the Susie raise your hand in the front of the room, and we know Billy Bob throw a pencil at the ceiling in the back of the room. And it's easy for all of the other kids, and every child matters. Every child is important. So when we think about schools, we have to think about it's still about relationship. Now you as policy leaders, you're sitting here at the 30,000-foot view. But we have to also think about the classroom and our relationships happening. When you're visiting a school, it's nice to see the technology, but you know what impresses me when I visit a school? When I see all the kids calling the principal's name as they walk down the hall and giving them a high five and they're saying, oh, I did well on my test. When I can see they have that relationship, that is what really sparks a great school. We have to relate before we educate. That comes first. So remember that we can talk about everything else, but it's about relationship. That's why sometimes you may have a very popular teacher who is not A+ in their knowledge of something, but they're getting something out of those students, and we have to pay attention to that relationship. So the second thing is reinvention. And this is where we're going to spend most of our time, is how are teachers reinventing, and specifically how are classrooms reinventing. And there's so many exciting things that are happening in classrooms, and I just wish more teachers could do it. I mean, I have teachers come up to me all the time here in the state of Georgia. I just keynoted at the GAETC, Georgia Association of Educators Technology Conference this past November, and I had so many who came up and said, I love all your stuff, but I can't do any of it. I'm on a script. They tell me what I have to cover when. And I'm like, if you put me on a script, I would be gone. I wouldn't do it. I started off in the business world. I went to Georgia Tech with this fellow over here and with Kelly, and I started off in the business world. Didn't plan to get into teaching, and they convinced me to go into teaching because we have 3 children, Kip and I, he's sitting over here, and our 2 boys have learning differences. I do not call them disabilities. I call them differences because every child learns differently. And the oldest, who one teacher told us could not learn and probably wouldn't graduate from high school, just graduated from Georgia Tech. And I was very proud of that. But we have to reinvent how we think. I think every single child can learn. Now, this is what disturbs me. So the OECD reports, everybody quotes, so we're lagging in math and we're lagging in English, we're lagging in all these things. Well, I actually met the guy who does the reports. I sit on the panel to judge the Global Teacher Prize, the $1 million prize that the Varkey Foundation gives out. And I actually sat with the fella, Arthur, I think it's, I can't say his last name, starts with an S, it's his long French name, was talking about this report. And I was sitting there thinking about these reports. And I'm kind of like going, okay, so you're the guy who decides that this is what we need to be. And it's important. We need to know math, and we need to know how to read. And I'm not saying that those reports are not valid. They're important. But what I am saying is, you can't find the solution to cancer on a multiple choice test. The problems we have in today's world, so many of them are how do we relate to people? How do we get along? How do we work together? How do we relate? How do we collaborate? How do we communicate? How do we invent new things? That's what we have to do today. And while tests are part of the equation, we have made it the whole equation. And it makes me furious because there are little bitty children who don't do well at math and don't do well at reading, but they are artists. I have a student who just started at SCAD this fall. And she made an amazing video. She was hired by a company up here in Atlanta, MadLearn, as a virtual intern. So her summer job for the last 2 summers is she has been in Camilla, Georgia, working and telecommuting to Atlanta, connecting in that way. And that's what we need. So how can we help that creativity come up? First of all, makerspace is going to be a big word that some of you have heard of. How many of you have already heard this term? Anybody? Makerspace, Invention Week. Creation stations, fab labs, all of these, and some communities are putting these in. Some communities are going together and buying a 3D printer for the whole town. Some libraries are transforming and putting these in. And it really sparks invention because you realize we have the ability to prototype now. People are coming up with their own products and printing them out on a 3D printer. So these are my students. Now I'm going to tell you, these are 3 of my rowdiest boys. You think I had any behavior problems with these guys? They didn't even know I existed, because they were making a robot. So maker spaces are important. Libraries are reinventing. This is what they call learning commons. A lot of libraries are putting in green screens. A lot of libraries are putting in movies. They're putting in all these other things, and it's something we need to put in. This is one of my students, Morgan, who's now in Valdosta, and in her 20% time, we use 20% time, which Google does. They made it famous, that 20% of your time is spent exploring a project of interest to you. Well, her interest was, how do I help kids who have autism? So she had a Twitter account, and she did a lot of research. We actually had some teachers up from Colquitt County who spent some time with us, and one of them had a child who was autistic, Do you know that Morgan got a thank you note, actually it was a thank you tweet or a direct message, got a thank you direct message because this mom was able to help her autistic child read because my 15-year-old student found some apps that they needed to help an autistic child. Like, that's meaning. Kids want to do things that mean something. They don't want wastebasket work. They want to matter in the world. And this kind of thing helps them matter when they can make, when they can invent. Now, this has already been alluded to, and these numbers are 2013 numbers. I'm sorry I couldn't find anything more recent, and with you being in charge of policy, so many of you, I know you have better numbers than this, so y'all forgive me. But this was 2013 census numbers that basically we have no suburban area over 80% internet access in households. This is by household, not by people, by household. So then I was playing with the math, because that's what us Georgia Tech people do. And I said, okay, if everybody in the state of Georgia had at least 70.04% who had internet, what would that mean for the state of Georgia? And it basically means that in 2013, 1 out of every 4 households in our state did not have internet access. Okay, that means a lot. It means a lot from education. It means a lot for innovation. The greatest economic development tool that ever hit Camilla, Georgia was when our city put in high-speed internet. And they've done a fantastic job at CNS. They've done a great job running it. They're probably a successful model to follow. They and Thomasville and several other places work together. And it really transformed my classroom. And it also means that I sit at home, I go home, I record a podcast, I do work for Microsoft and Samsung and Google, and I do work for all these companies all over the world right from Camilla, Georgia. And I don't have to travel, and I can be a teacher too. So we think of the people who don't have access that we can unleash. Think of the students, think of the adults. I know that, you know, people don't want to pay for folks to watch Netflix, but a lot of folks have real work to do that they need the internet for. And I know it really hurts my dad. Every time it rains, he can't do any work, and he's a farmer. So that's because he has it over satellite. Forsyth County, and I don't know if you were part of this, did something really interesting. They had a public-private partnership. So they had the businesses in town said, okay, we know that you want your kids to have access, and we're going to sign up and say, you know what, you can come use our Wi-Fi. And they put these little stickers, and it's called a free Wi-Fi zone from Forsyth County Schools. And okay, they didn't ask anybody for any money for this. It's a great example of how we can work together to help our kids have access to the internet and do their work and do their classwork. In DC, they call it the homework gap. Now, teachers don't like the term the homework gap because there are a lot of teachers who believe that you don't want to have homework. And in France, from what I understand, they actually outlawed homework because homework actually gives the advantage a greater advantage because their parents actually do homework with their kids. And there are a lot who don't do homework with their kids. But there is a place for some homework, I think. But when they're talking about homework gap, it's not quite the same thing as whether you should do homework or not. So if you talk to teachers and you talk to principals and you talk to others, you know, I guess y'all are used to getting in trouble with the words you use sometimes. Just be careful if you use the term homework gap with teachers because it kind of means a different thing to teachers. And then having access in devices. So there's something called checking for understanding. So you're used to what teachers call summative assessment. You study a chapter, you take a test, right? Everybody used to that? You study a chapter, you take a test. Okay. Well, we can do something now called formative assessment. That means I can basically get in the brains of my students and understand as I am teaching them, how is the knowledge forming? Did they get what I said? Because used to, say, the hardest thing I teach is binary numbers. So say I'm teaching binary numbers, and what happens? Susie, raise your hand at the front of the room. I know it, let's move on. And the rest of the kids are ducking for cover, hoping I'll just move on and stop talking, right? I don't really need to understand this. Well, what you can do with formative assessment is I tell them, pull out your phones, let's see what you understand. They all put in their answers, and I get a little chart right at my desk. I can see that Susie, raise your hand, is the only person who understood how to do that. And I need to teach it more. So I literally don't give a test until I already know over 80% of the kids know it. Well, a test should never be a surprise to a teacher that is a modern 21st century teacher. But here's the problem. Many of our teachers in the state of Georgia, number one, their kids don't have access, and number two, they haven't been trained. It's there. It's here. There's no excuse for every teacher at every school not to use this. And the tools are free. They just need access, and you can do it on your phones. Also, I think every school should make movies. Movies are the modern essay. We got a grant because we have a great YouTube channel, and I share stuff that the kids do. I've had kids. I have one student who has now gone into the movie business. I actually have 3 or 4 now. He's a first assistant director here in Atlanta. He's done some work on Stranger Things. He did Family Feud. He rode in the back of a car and filmed some music video for Outkast. But he actually came back, and I had a digital film class, and he helped teach me how to teach the kids, how do you operate on a movie set? How does that work? And the kids make powerful things that really, we had the most scholarships of any senior class we've ever had this past year. And we really attribute it to 2 things. Number one, they know how to make compelling movies, and number 2, they make apps. So all my kids make apps, all of them make movies, and it's not that hard to do. So making movies is important. Here's some of my students shooting from a drone. I have kids now who are doing work for farmers, who are doing work for all kinds of people with drone shoots. And how many of you have worked with any drones? Anybody? Yeah, it's huge. Businesses are hiring people. This is a great area to work, and they're getting drones they're asking for Christmas, and then they're getting hired out to do work. So filming from drones is a big part of what we do also. Here's the other thing, is at my school, everybody codes. This is one of my students helping a younger student learn how to program a video game. We do something called Hour of Code, which is a nationwide emphasis to teach every single child how to code, and it's free, and every school can do it. So I think every child should be exposed to coding. Is every child going to love coding? No, of course not. Not every child likes art. I mean, don't hand me a paintbrush. So everybody has different things that they like. We can't force fit, and that's where I guess I come back to that testing that upsets me. My student Rebecca, who is the most gifted artist I've ever seen, would it really upset me too much if she scored a 60 percentile on a math test? Honestly, I would really care more about her artwork and her design work, because math is not her gift, and we just have to shift a little bit. So this is some of my students who won a Shark Tank competition. Their out was Drone Zone. Mark is now at Georgia Tech, and Cole actually went out of state. I was kind of sad to see him go somewhere else, try to keep him in state. But they won and got some investment money for their app that they put on the store, and this was when they were 10th graders. Everybody connects, so we do global collaboration and connect with the world. But our latest project is called Mad About Mattering. I do it with Mad Learn, which is based here in Atlanta. Alethea Bhatia is the CEO there. But Flowery Branch works with us. It's a public school. And Ron Clark Academy down the road. They're collaborators. And then we have 8 other schools. This past year we had over 800 kids write apps together. So it's real important. For public schools should work with private schools, should work with charter schools when we're collaborating. I just think that everybody, we're studying Georgia history. Why don't we have one big massive site where all the kids go in? And when you're studying about Andersonville, why don't you connect with a kid who lives there and talk about Andersonville over Skype or however you want to talk about it? And then I'll teach about some things that maybe happened in Camilla. I don't know how much happened in Camilla, but a few things happened. We had, besides our terrible tornadoes. But this is my kids getting ready to present online, and they present online. Our first judging, we had judges from Microsoft and Google and from DC and from all over the place that were judges. So we know no limits. Our first project we did was called the Flat Classroom Project, where I collaborated with a teacher in Bangladesh and ended up in Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat, way back when I started this journey back in 2005, 2006. But I'm still shocked. I go to conferences, and they want me to talk about global collaboration because nobody's doing it. And there's really no reason that people can't do that. This is one of my students, Casey. She was in our first set of projects, and her second project that she did, she has students on this team, and if you could squint and read, you would see Bangladesh, Austria, China, and the U.S. were on her team. And she was mentioned in Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. Well, Casey is now a farmer in South Georgia, working with water policy. She was just hired. I think she's the head of the Conservation Districts organization for Georgia now. And she learned how to collaborate. So she is farming and working with water policy and living in Camilla because distance means nothing to her, because she understands how to use technology. And if you live in a rural, how many of you are in rural Georgia? Anybody? A few of you? And then the rest of you are in more suburban? Some of you aren't going to raise your hand. I know what's happening. Okay? Atlanta folks. So a lot of Atlanta folks. But hey, even Atlanta folks, you get some great value and diversity in your organization when you can have telecommuters from other places. So Casey's, this is Miller. Miller was named one of the top students at University of Georgia. She was one of our lead collaborators. She was a project manager in high school, leading an AT team, leading a team of kids around the world. Now she's at the Medical College of Georgia. I saw her Friday night and about to be a doctor and doing amazing work. And I'll tell you, kids who collaborate and connect and use technology, they are different. They do amazing things. Now, there's something else I wish every school in the state of Georgia had, and that's game-based learning. Now, Ron Clark probably does it best, and if you've never seen his school, you really should. He is one of the best educators on the planet. How many of you have actually read the Harry Potter books? Anybody read any of them? You know how they separate into houses? Okay, that's what they do on the first day at Ron Clark Academy. They spin a dial. They have 4 houses. You see all the different colored shirts? They have 4 houses. They have a year-long competition. There are actually a lot of folks who are doing this now, and I was talking to Kip in the car, and he said they've been doing that in England for years. But there's a way that you can make learning a game. And my 8th grade keyboarding class, they have houses, and we have a whole gamified thing we use called Classcraft, and it is literally a game, and nobody really understands it because like, oh no, I did that wrong, I just got damaged. And so other adults don't understand the little language, but I'll tell you this, the kids run to class and they love what I teach them because we have turned it into a game. And I wish that for every school. I'm greatly disturbed by what's happened in our kindergartens everywhere, including we have over-standardized kindergarten. I'm going to tell you, if you could pass something that requires to pull back some of the ridiculousness of standards with kindergarten, I think everybody would applaud you. If you could require that kindergartners get to play a certain amount every day, we worry about creativity dropping. When we sit there and we have kids in the classroom all day long and they are 3 and 4, they are wired to play, especially our little boys. You want to know why we're having behavior problems and an increase in suspensions at that age? It's because we're putting them in a desk all day. I mean, what 4-year-old is made for a desk? And I'll tell you this, a lot of parents are very angry right now across the country about what's happening in our kindergartens. It's really a sore spot for a lot of parents. And then the other thing is little Johnny struggles in reading. What do? And he's ADD. But what do? I'm going to hold you back from PE or recess and make you read. Come on, little Johnny needs PE and recess more than anybody else. So these are some things, though, that the pressure of testing has caused real, what I call educational malpractice. It's not the teacher's fault. We have amazing teachers in this state. We have a lot of great people, but there are some things that are fundamentally flawed and wrong that need to change. Physical exercise is important. In Texas, they went and studied the impact of physical exercise on learning, and they had a whole school that came in and had recess first thing. Then they taught them math, and do you know their math scores went up? So physical activity and learning go together. Okay, and then here's another hot button, is knowing their strengths. So all of my 10th graders, you have to wait till after they go through puberty pretty much to give this type of test. But we give them, it takes about 4 hours, and we give them a test to find all of their strengths. You can look it up. It's U Science, Y-O-U Science. I took it and I learned about me. It's an amazing tool. But we're looking at their strengths because here's one of the things that we've been doing. We've said every child is going to be amazing at math. Every child is going to be amazing at reading. Well, some kids are not wired for math. Well, when you find their strengths, what I care about is if you are great at math, are we making you better at math? And do you meet the minimum requirements so that when my husband hires you and you go work in a factory that you know what, an inch is or a millimeter is, and you don't say, where's the multiple choice test that has happened to him? Where's the multiple choice test that gives me the measurements to pick from on this ruler? I'm like, this is the real world. This is a factory. We have to measure stuff, So do we know kids' strengths? Do we know what they're great at? And are we helping them? Now, this is Mia Hamm. She's one of the greatest women's soccer players ever. But let me tell you what she did. She knew she was great at soccer. When she was 12, she played on a boys' soccer team. She went and found the very best soccer player she could. When we have a kid who is strong at programming, why aren't we connecting them online with other kids who are great at programming and making them better? Why aren't we letting them go and spend time with Mike? He would love some interns and let them telecommute. Why aren't we helping people find their peers? And actually, I've spent some time talking to some folks in D.C. to prepare for today, since I'm not a policy person. And they said one of the best things that some states are doing is helping schools find other like schools. So if you have a rural school and you have another rural school with varied demographics, and this school is doing well in math and this school is doing well in reading, facilitating a connection between like schools and helping them learn from each other. Because I'm just going to tell you what happens in rural Georgia. And I love Atlanta. I lived here for many years. But what happens in rural Georgia is we get folks from big cities who come tell us what to do that works in big cities, and it doesn't work in rural Georgia. It doesn't. So we need to try to help and facilitate those connections between like-minded schools, between like-minded students. You get artists. Why aren't we connecting artists? Robotics competitions. Look at what's happening with that in the state. Those are just exploding. So many kids are joining in robotics, and it's this same Mia Hamm principle of finding the best and putting them together so that they can become even better. Everybody has opportunities. Now, this is from Louisiana, and they do something really interesting in their state. They reward schools based on what they call strength of diploma. Strength of diploma. So they actually reward schools for having more IB courses, having more AP courses, having stronger courses in that school. Because one thing that will happen sometimes is your poorer schools, even the gifted kids in the poorer schools, suffer too. When you have a poor school, you still have gifted kids there that need great things and great experiences. So this is a very interesting one to look at. Tennessee's doing some things also with this. But I also think everybody should have an audience. We tweet from my classroom. We live stream from my classroom. We connect with the world. We were learning about nanotechnology, and we actually Skyped with the guy who wrote Nanotechnology for Dummies from California. Okay, I know that sounds crazy, like nanotechnology for dummies, but we Skyped with him, and we're connecting, and we're talking, and we're interviewing people. So if we see somebody amazing, we're going to connect. And we just don't know boundaries. I mean, honestly, if we're from Georgia, everybody thinks we live in Atlanta anyway, because everybody thinks Atlanta is Georgia. So we don't really bother explaining where we are. But everybody needs an audience, and so much transformation is happening in my classroom with having an audience. There's research about it. I won't bore you with all the education research, but I'm going to just tell you my own story. So I'm a product of Governor's Honors. I was in communicative arts, changed my life. Amazing program. I cannot tell you what that program did for my life. Of course, the GAETC conference and then Leadership Georgia. Those were things that really changed my life, as well as my time at Georgia Tech. Well, when I was at Governor's Honors, they took us out of the classroom and they took us to a graveyard, and we wrote poetry. And I wrote probably what I consider my best poem I'd ever written. And when I went to Georgia Tech, we had a publication called The Errado, and they published it in that first issue. And I got a letter, and I actually found it the other day and took a picture and tweeted it out, from a person who was kind of anonymous. They called themselves Friend of China, and he said I had the heart of a poet. That moment of having one stranger read something I had written in a piece and responding is probably why I have 153,000 Twitter followers today. Because it showed me that there were people out there that I could help or encourage or connect with or be part of their life too. So we don't just live life in our tiny towns and our tiny communities. We live a bigger life now. We have the opportunity to make the world a better place. And I really did not plan on being the cool cat teacher and being followed. I started blogging coming back from the GAETC conference because I knew I needed to teach my students. My students named me the cool cat teacher. We're the Westwood Wildcats. And so they're like, you're cool. We're the Wildcats, so you be the cool cat teacher. Casey, that I showed you the picture of, actually helped me name my blog. And then all of a sudden, people started following me. And I'm like, what is going on? And they were reading my stuff. And within a year, I was nominated for Best Teaching Blog in the World. And I'd won the Online Learning Award and was in Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. And I'm like, what? Like, the world changed. Everything changed. And now our audience is not some letter that somebody puts in your P.O. box in college. It's when somebody messages back. My son was at a thing in D.C. and met the chaplain of the Senate, who's an amazing person. And I tweeted him about my son's experience. He tweeted me back, and we connected and had a little bitty conversation. It's just amazing what audience does. And it changed my life, and it changes the life of students. So now we want to shift, though, to teachers. Okay, so I've talked about my wish for classrooms. Teachers, there's all this stuff out here I've mentioned, right? The formative assessment and the makerspace and all that. Well, teachers are asked to do it, but they're just supposed to go home and just learn it whenever you get a chance. Just go home and figure it out, right? That's what most teachers are asked to do. And with the ESSA Act, teachers are actually able to personalize their learning. They're kind of shocked. They're in shock a little bit, though, because nobody's ever asked them what they wanted to learn. So we're having a little bit of an adjustment period. I'm getting emails from people all over, not just in Georgia, going, how am I going to write this personal plan? Nobody's ever asked me what I wanted to learn before and what I need to improve. And I always tell them, formative assessment, start there if you don't understand it. But I know teachers that their school's got Chromebooks, and they're literally opening up the Chromebooks, and the training was going to be in another 6 months. That just makes no sense to me. So somehow, and I was talking to some of the folks in D.C., somehow we've got to partner money we spend on training and money we spend on technology to try to make sure that gets spent at the same time, if at all possible. Because otherwise, if you buy technology and you don't train the teachers, you're really wasting your money. I hate to tell you that because I like technology, but you're just wasting your money. Here's the thing. Teachers are smart. Most of your teachers 55 or older, how many of you remember these? You're going to show your age if you remember this. Anybody remember the blue ink? The smell of power. You know, I can pass this test. Okay, so this is a mimeograph machine for those of you who are younger and you have no idea what I'm talking about. And it was done with a chemical reaction, and you basically could get high smelling the paper, okay? It's just how it was. So these teachers had to mix all these formulas and stuff to be able to do mimeograph machines. That's your teachers 55 and older did this stuff. They're smart. If they can operate a mimeograph, they can operate this. They can. But you can't just expect them to figure it out. They used to have, I've asked them, they had training on the mimeograph machine, because if you didn't mix it just right, I don't know what would happen, but I don't think it would be very good. So we train them on mimeographs, and we're not training them how, okay, everybody can have their phone now in the state of Georgia. Mike, that was your legislation. Can have their phone, but I'll tell you this, I have some friends in a school up the road that I won't name. I was telling her about formative assessment, and she says, nope, they make us, they can't have their phones on campus. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, they can do so much with these. No, we don't let them have it. It's just too much trouble. And it's like, it's because they don't have anything constructive to do with them, because the teachers haven't been taught how to use them. And then just innovate. This is a girl on the left. I am so excited about the Amazon Echo in the classroom. Amazon Alexa. Little kids, what's 1 + 2? And they're checking their math facts. How do you spell? Get one at home. If you're tired of doing homework, how do you spell committee? And it'll spell it for you, right? And it does. And so there are people all over the country. Teachers are buying these themselves because they are so helpful. It's like having a virtual assistant. And then I can take my kids anywhere in the world with Google Cardboard and their cell phone. These are all parts of innovation that we should have. So great teachers, I believe, have no script. I believe they're empowered, they're passionate, they're interested, they're knowledgeable, they're able to bring their interest to the classroom. But please don't think it's age. So this is Miss Atkins. This is Miss Grace Atkins. She is a full-time Learning Lab director at my school, and she turns 90 in May. She was my 4th grade teacher, as she corrects me. She rides 120 miles a week on her stationary bike. She reads 3 books a week. So if you've got an excuse about not exercising, Miss Atkins, she can just put all of us to shame. This woman is amazing. And she's almost 90, and sometimes I wonder what we've done to ourselves because we're so eager to push some amazing people out the door. Because once you got the teaching bug, you got it for life. I do think that there's things we can do to help more teachers stay in teaching. Sometimes I think teachers need a sabbatical. I know teachers who retire, and after a year, they're ready to go back in the classroom. But they retired. So what are they going to do with the rest of their lives? They love kids. They're amazing teachers. They were almost about to burn out after 30 years of this stuff. And why can't we do sabbaticals? The other thing I'm thrilled about, and I don't know if we can ever make it happen because we got unions and you got principal and you got all this, but this whole idea of teacher leaders. We'll jump ahead. How many of you have heard of teaching hospitals? Like, we've all heard of those, where you have doctors who doctor and also teach, okay? There's this thing called research schools that's a little tiny budding movement that's starting to spread. It really started in Silicon Valley. And what's happening is sometimes the principal might teach a class, and sometimes the curriculum director might teach a class or 2, and sometimes the IT director might teach a class or 2. Because here's what's happening. Education is moving so fast that people who leave the classroom become irrelevant like that. Just like that. It's so fast. It's like medicine. It's just so fast that you can become irrelevant. We've got to find a way for everybody to be able to teach and then also be able to help other teachers. And I don't know if the powers that be are going to allow this, but I'll tell you this. I know some great schools. A lot of them are charter schools. Some of them are private schools who are doing this now. And it's fantastic. So we need teacher leaders. But you are seeing the term residency and clinicals coming up. So some states, Tennessee is doing this where they have residencies, and you may go teach in an inner city school for a couple years, and then that's your residency as a teacher, and then you can choose to go teach where you want to. So these terms are starting to happen, and these are things that we could do here in the state of Georgia. But now here's what we're dealing with. Okay, how many of you saw Jurassic Park? I really thought teaching would be just this nice little happy place. But I don't care where you teach. If you're talking to a teacher, it's a struggle. It's hard. And you deal with a lot of it because a lot of you are politicians and policymakers. Now, I worked for a very short period of time. I was an intern through the Carl Vinson Institute of Government for Sam Nunn many years ago when I was in college. And intern means you get to answer the phone calls with the crazy people. Okay? So if they thought that Senator Nunn was going to pass a law that laser beams were going to put out everybody's eyes in the United States, then I had to talk to the person. But I'll tell you this, and I work with amazing parents, I work with amazing kids, but I think that the whatever that causes crazy people is kind of on the increase. Because, I mean, I get it because I do social media, so I get trolls and I get stalkers and I get all that kind of mess when you have a lot of followers. But the sad thing is I'm seeing this in education. This is why some teachers are leaving. Kindness never goes out of style. Respect. If you've got a problem with a person, my dad, James Lee Adams, always taught me, go talk to the person face to face. Just go talk to them. And you, as politicians and policymakers, my hope for you is that you will model for all of us how we should act. Because there are just so few people these days who seem to be modeling it. So now we're here to the end of this, and I think I have, 4 minutes left? How much time do I have left? A few minutes? So a guy named Michael Simmons told a great story in Albany. He's a head of the oldest African-American church in Albany. And imagine yourself going into your neighborhood, and the police line is across, and you see smoke, and you're looking and you're thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on? And you get out of your car, and all you can think of is that it's my house. Is my house the one burning? Because there's something going on. And you fight your way through, and you run, and you are trying to get to your house because everything you love and everything you care about and everything that matters to you is in that house. And those things are not pictures on walls or photo albums. Those things are people. And you are trying to get to your house, and then you get to your house, and you almost feel guilty because you look and it's your neighbor's house, and your neighbor's house is on fire. So you take a deep breath and you say, it's not my house. Okay, we can't have that kind of thinking anymore because this is our house and this is our state and this is our children and this is our future. And I'm just tired of excuses. Kip and I were talking in the cars were coming up, and it's like, how long do we have these conversations about education? Can you ever remember a time when we weren't having a conversation about education and making it better? Can anybody remember a time? Do people ever get tired of it? What works? What's going to make things better? And the answer really goes back to NASA in the 1960s. There was a politician who walked up to a guy who was a janitor, and he was sweeping up under the lockers. He said, what are you doing, sir? Because he made eye contact, and he kind of felt like he had to talk to him. And he said, I'm putting a man on the moon. And the politician was struck because from the top of that organization to the bottom of that organization, they had a unifying vision that they were going to put a man on the moon. Now, standards are okay, but we have too many of them. But I have one standard. This is my only thing. When I went to my school, I said I'm building a world-class technology program. And the kids laughed at me. Some of the teachers laughed at me. But the greatest software ever invented is not technology, it's this. There is nothing that can overcome the human brain and the human will when we decide we're going to do something. And I'll tell you this, Georgia has a lot of resources, but we have some of the most stubborn people on the planet in this state. I'm just going to tell you. We have got some stubborn people that when they set their mind to something. So why can't we have a common vision as a state that every child, we can't be self-serving anymore and say, oh, my children's education is going to be okay. It's our children. It's our house. Our neighbor's house is our house. We have to think about what is our common vision. I'm going to skip a few things here because I teach bell to bell. But I will tell you this, one of the most important things to realize is that our expectations are everything. Do you know the number one indicator of success in a classroom is what the teacher believes about whether their children can learn and whether the teacher is able to teach them. The expectations. But our children have expectations too. 90% of people who end up in prison were told by one or both parents that you'll end up in prison. So what we say to people is very important, and I know that people have to get elected, but I'll tell you this. You have teachers that are spending all their money buying Google Cardboard, buying their maker spaces, buying all this stuff, and when they hear people talk about how sorry all the teachers are, it makes me angry. It makes teachers angry. Teachers are giving everything they have to a society that doesn't appreciate them very much at all. And is really eager to bash them, and they can't, and teachers, we can't tell our side of the story, ever, because it has to remain private. So, all of you had that teacher, and I want you to think back of who was that teacher. Have you thanked that teacher? Have you thanked that teacher publicly? Have you gone to visit that teacher? Have you called that teacher? And I promise you, that teacher had an expectation of you and said, I want you, Kelly, to be different. I want you to be more. I want you to reach your best. I want you to be amazing. And that expectation got you there. So the question is, what do you actually expect out of schools in the state of Georgia? Have you just thrown up your hands and you're like, whatever, as long as it's not my child? Or are you saying, you know what, every child deserves a great education, because if we can invest and if we can get this mindset and get out of the trap of the past and move to the future, we can actually do something in this state that is special and different. Because I'll tell you this, as much time as I spend in D.C. trying on the phone with them, trying to find lots of exciting and innovative things, I don't know how much exciting and new and innovative I really heard. Because we're in a new day with new neuroscience, with new brains, new children. We've got to think differently. So I'll just encourage you with this. Do teachers have a seat at the table when you're making policy? Are you giving teachers, classroom teachers, a seat at the table when you're talking about classrooms? Because they are some of the most qualified to help you make the decisions you need to make for the state. Thanks.